Oh, Michael, if you could build a superstar from the ground up, he'd look like Randy Orton. JBL used to say this a hell of a lot back in the day when he was a commentator. But to be honest with you, I always thought Randy Orton's eyes were a little bit too small and beady to have the vision of someone with a couple of froggy numbers like The Miz. So, John Bradshaw Layfield, I see your Randy Orton being the perfect pro wrestler, and I raise you whatever the hell we're going to produce by the end of this video. I'm Ross Tweddell from Cultaholic Wrestling, and we are building the literal perfect pro wrestler from the ground up. I'm sorry, it's going to be terrifying. Our feet are on the ground, so let's start our build there. And when I think of feet in professional wrestling, I think of Snitsky and Tony Atlas, but that's for very, very different reasons. But when we come to think about that combination of footwork in the ring and the ability to use those feeties as lethal weapons, only one man comes to mind. Growing up, he's the only fella I heard have his tootsies described as educated. It's Rob Van Dam. He can roll thunderously around the ring like a cat high on life. He can leap to the top rope like a cat high on MDMA. He can kick your head off like a cat off its face after too much you-know-what. His feet can do everything. I would not be surprised if he could pick up a telephone or pour himself a drink by using his feet and his feet alone. They're that clever. Next up, we have the legs, and the main thing we're looking at here is that combination of strength and the stamina to carry our perfect wrestler's arse around that ring for as long as they need to, and the aesthetics that make you think of a prime pair of pork chops every time you see those glistening, thick, with two C's obviously, thunder thighs. And when you put all those three things into a meaty blender, the result is not Stacy Keibler, you dirty bugger. It's got to be Claudio Castagnoli. A solid base to lift anybody? Yes, of course. The elasticity in those hamstrings to perform some silly moves a wrestler of his size should not be able to do? Yes, of course. That endurance, that means he can go for days. Fam, have you seen him take down endless fools in many matches, not even come remotely close to sweating? Of course you have. So the legs have to be Claudio's. Moving on up, and we get to the groin area, and because I'm not going to be saying which pro wrestler I believe to have the most perfect of private parts, because that would be very weird, we'll label this trait of our perfect pro wrestler the Kavorka, or that BDE. Someone who has Kavorka, according to the Urban Dictionary, well, it goes something like this. They just got it like that. Damn! She just carried herself like she got hella Kavorka. And as much as I'd love to have LA Knight bring the spirit to this perfect pro wrestler, it's got to be the man that many people compare LA Knight to this day, and that has got to be the OG in the Kavorka stakes, The Rock. Back in the day, everyone either wanted to shag or go for a drink with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, or do both. Whatever floats your boat. So who else could provide the Kavorka here, really? Can your hands make another human's head look like an apple? Can your hands crush another human's skull and make it bleed its own blood from the inside outwards? Can your hands presumably create the power of flight if you merely start to flap them quite vigorously? And most importantly of all, can your hands steal the WWE Championship away from Jinder Mahal mere seconds after he's won the thing to make certain pictures look like you've actually won it yourself? When it comes to the hands of the perfect pro wrestler and the devastation these ones in particular can cause, we've got to have the great Carlies in there, don't we? They're one of a kind, they're two of a kind, really. You get hands in pairs, don't you? I don't know how that works. Anyway, forget about your finickety joint manipulation tactics and your origami-esque finger bangs. I just want to see things squashed, and Carly is the man to do that with just his bare hands and nothing else. Next up, we have the arms, and this one is down to two things for me. Obviously, you want the strength so you can do any power move to even the heaviest of wrestlers, but as we all know, pro wrestling can be a business based on aesthetics in the eyes of some, so we need to have dem veins be a popping as well. The arms that fit those two characteristics the best, in my humble opinion, belong to Big Popper Pump Scott Steiner, who used his peaks to not only attract the freaks, but to also throw fools around the ring. That's a tongue twister. Throw fools around the ring by using several suplexes. And on top of that, have you ever seen anyone make press-ups look so simple? I think not. Next up, we get to the core and the spine area of our wrestler, and I'm grouping these two things together because we can only see the front of them there, so deal with it. This area of the body needs to be everything I am not. It needs to be strong, and it needs to be ideally a little bit flexible as well, so we can do all of the fancy professional wrestler moves without getting too injured. And when you put those two things together, in your head box, one thing popped into my mind: the greatest Northern Light suplex in the history of professional wrestling. Yes, this area of the body has to go to Alicia Fox, to give her her full name, because, and I stand by this, nobody can bridge like she used to. Nobody. She's the GOAT. Look at that form there on the Northern Light suplex. I've had magically appear on that screen there, man. Put some respect on the name of Alicia Fox. Up to the chest we go, and once more, just like the arms, we have a couple of crucial criteria that we need to meet. We need the strength in those pecs, but we also need those titties to be popping. That's a sentence I've now said in public. So when I think of the best chest in professional wrestling, and not want to be like Jerry the King Lawler, the old dirty bugger, I think of a man who used to make his titties dance in the middle of a match, and that was the masterpiece, Chris Masters. His muscle tits helped him lock on and crush folk with the master lock, so that proves they are strong. And well, look at those things, man. They're bloody lovely, aren't they? I'm not a creep, honestly. Now, I was tempted to do the jaw because in real fights you need a strong jaw to survive, apparently, but then I realised professional wrestling isn't real fighting, so for the mouth, we're going to do the mouth bit. We're obviously linking this straight to promo ability. This one comes down to personal taste, and for me, there was no one more iconic than Ric Flair when it comes to promos in professional wrestling. It's the revolutionary style that has stood the test of time. Many have tried to replicate, and few have come close to touching the GOAT with the stick in his hand. It's the catchphrases, it's the sheer madness, the passion of the stuff. There is nobody like him before, and I'd argue very few have come close since. So Ric Flair gives our perfect pro wrestler the gift of the gab. Of course, wrestlers needed a good nose in the 1980s when they were bashing those rails of white powder, but now their sense of smell and sniff isn't really tested, so we're moving on up to the eyes. Now, I was thinking that we should pick the eyes of a tag team wrestler because some of their attacks, it'll come out of their peripheral vision in tornado tags and the like, something singles wrestlers don't really need to experience outside of a Royal Rumble and matches like that. But then I've gone and had a Tiffany epiphany, let me tell you, when it comes to the eyes, because I may have slagged them off at the start of this video, but I've just come to realise that Randy Orton does indeed have the best eyesight in pro wrestling, and it comes down to one thing, everybody: night vision. Randy's normal eyes have made him one of the best wrestlers of all time, but how many other of the GOATs have used night vision to beat up some old fellas like Orton did back in September of 2020? A lot is said about having a mind for the business, and obviously we need to give our professional wrestler the cream of the crop. While the obvious answer might be Bobby the Brain Heenan because it's in his name, too many of his plans were thwarted to be considered. While Jake the Snake Roberts, on the other hand, is said to have the psychology of the business down, he doesn't have the world titles to the name that I'm looking for. So we've got to go for someone who has it both in and out of the ring, and I'm going to use some Cultaholic Wrestling podcast lore for this one. Many moons ago, the question was asked, why is Triple H considered cerebral? And it was determined that it was because he thinks more than most professional wrestlers do. Therefore, the brain of our perfect pro wrestler has to be the cerebral winner, the cerebral barrier with the cerebral shovel. He's even cerebral at child making. He's cerebral at everything, man. It's Triple H. And for the hair, well, there's only one hairstyle we could go for, in my opinion. He is large, he is saucy, he once detailed in a shoot interview just how much work he used to put into his mane back in the day. It's specifically the big sexy era of Kevin Nash in WCW. I wish I could do that, but I can't do that with my curly locks. Anyway, and there we have the perfect pro wrestler from the ground up. JBL was wrong. Look, he was categorically wrong. That is the best pro wrestler that ever could exist ever, right? Up yours, John.